The Falling Forward podcast exists to encourage Christians to continue to gain ground in their faith. Please subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. And thank you for joining us as we have insightful conversations about never falling back, but falling forward in the Christian faith. Hey, what's up, guys? This is Dakota.
And I'm Clayton.
And you're on the Falling Forward podcast.
Our guest today is Drew Webb. Drew comes on here as a good friend of ours and shares a personal struggle that he has had in his own life, but ultimately how God's grace is greater than his sin.
It was a privilege to have Drew on the show, and we know it's a podcast that you will enjoy. All right. We're here with Mr. Drew Webb.
What's up?
How's it going, man?
Some good water. It's going good. Going good. Just got dropped a class this morning for the first time in
So you
several
did get to
years.
drop it.
I was able to drop it, and that leaves me so much room for activities.
For freedom.
Yeah.
Being crazy.
Oh, so you're just lazy, so you just quit.
No, it wasn't lazy. The class was kind of beating me up, and there's been a lot of things going on this semester between school and work and now planning a wedding and everything else. So this was just one thing that I knew I had to
Yeah, so you
flick
were,
out of the way.
So tell the listeners a little bit. You are recently engaged.
Yes, I proposed actually a week ago. Well, a week ago today. So yeah, we were together. I think what's today's date? Like the 7th, 8th.
You gotta know this by heart, man.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know what today's date is. Our anniversary was actually on the 5th, our 10-month anniversary. So 10 months out, and now before a little bit after a year, we'll be married. So
Wow.
July 20th, man.
Wow.
This is happening fast.
Yeah, it is happening fast. So, which is kind of cool because y'all kind of met each other. So y'all, how long did you say y'all been together?
So we've been together 10 months, but we only knew each other like on our third date. We went official.
Oh, really?
So we had like 3 weeks to really talk and get to know each other, and then we were like, time to dive in. Let's do it.
Wow, that's really cool because y'all are. It's cool that you kind of know. Hey, this is a woman for me for the rest of my life. And obviously she said yes, so she felt the same way.
She better have said yeah. And when she hears this, she's going to be like, what do you mean?
So that's pretty exciting, man. That's something to look forward to because it'll change the trajectory of your life.
Yeah.
Being married. So
yeah,
hey.
it's a big deal. Like I always knew it was a big deal. And then like it happened to me. And I'm like, oh, this is a really big deal.
It's crazy, huh? I will say, man, getting married and being married at a young age, because how old are you?
24.
24.
And she's 26.
And that's perfect.
Older women.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
I got married pretty young and 21. I love it. You know, it's a lot of fun. So, anyways, for the listeners, man, I love to talk a little bit about yourself to kind of get them to know who Drew Webb is.
Yeah.
Maybe you want to talk a little bit about what you're doing now in your ministry. Where do you go to school? You mentioned school. Just open up a little bit about that.
Okay. Yeah. So Drew Webb, I'm just a country boy from Mississippi. Some people would argue that I'm country because sometimes I have the country accent, but not necessarily the way I dress.
You do not dress or behave
like a country boy. But I'm still a country boy at heart because, yeah, grew up with horses and bale and hay and that whole deal. So grew up in Mississippi. I accepted Christ when I was 8, and then after that, hadn't really experienced what I guess actual sin was, any of those hardcore sins, until high school, except for one, which I think we're going to talk about here in a bit.
Just being more aware of that. As you got older.
being more aware of all the different temptations and struggles that are out there.
It's like, yeah, I first sinned at 8 years old.
Yeah. Oh, I was a perfect child. People thought I was. Never mind. I was about to say some heresy, but I won't do that. So accepted Christ when I was 8. Grew up in church. Like my family was one of the founding families of my home church back home.
Yeah.
So all I've ever known was go to church on Sundays, Wednesdays, and if there's anything to do in between those, you go and help with that too.
Yeah.
So church has always been a big part of my life. So love football, played football. surrendered to first felt the call and, in quote, surrendered to the ministry my sophomore year. Never forget it. I was at Student Life at Louisiana Tech with Louis Giglio was our speaker, and Christian Stanfield, before it was like the Passion Band, was leading worship. And I'll never forget, it was like one of the last nights, and Louis had called this girl up, who was, I can't remember how old she was, but she was maybe in junior high, maybe like freshman or sophomore in high school, and she was pregnant. And his whole thing was, even though she has now realized her sin, like God is not done using her, and he is going to use her even more and use her story to help others and things like that. And he just had a big push on that, on forgetting our past and not limiting in our own lives what God can do because of our sin.
Wow.
Because God can take over that. And from that moment, I went outside with my buddy, and we talked about it. We both laid some things out there to each other, and ding. And so we made the commitment to be in the ministry, and then I kind of ran from it again.
Yeah.
So it was that roller coaster ride of, I want to be in ministry. I want to play football. I want to be in ministry. I want to coach football, and all these different things. So that happened up until January 13th. Not January 13th. January 1st, 2013, when I got a phone call from one of my friends, and he had told me that one of our youth ministers had committed suicide. So from that, it just kind of turned into chasing God, and whatever God wanted me to do, I was doing it.
Just kind of realizing the brevity of life.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So that happened, and literally, like, I think it was like 4 months after I had my first church job at 19 years old.
Wow.
And I was a youth pastor at 19, and from then I've been in ministry nonstop. So
and that was with like no formal training,
right.
You've told me that story before. The youth pastor you had that committed suicide, you were really close to.
Yeah. He was a big brother. He was a mentor. And he was actually only there when I first moved up to the youth. He was only there a couple months before he left. But during that time, like, we had some good talks, and like, he had kind of encouraged me. He was like, dude, you're going to do big things one day. You're going to do big things one day. You're going to do big things one day. And as a sixth grader, you're like,
whatever, dude.
What? No, I'm not. I'm a little kid. Like, nobody in this youth group looks up to me. I'm in sixth grade. How can you see that? Or how do you know that? And so I kind of pushed it off until my sophomore year, when I really, like, truly felt the call for the first time. And then it was just, like I said, that roller coaster where you're running, and then you're back to it, and running and back to it, running and back to it. And then it got there to when he committed suicide, and then it was a whole different ball game from there. So I'm 5 years now into the ministry. So
would you ever look back? Would you see yourself with your family or anyone seeing yourself being part of ministry? Like, were your parents involved in church, like to the point of serving? Like, was your dad a pastor or anything like that?
My dad wasn't a pastor, but my entire family has always had something to do with serving.
Yeah.
So my dad was a volunteer firefighter, and he worked for Atmos Energy too. Like, that was his paid job. But when he wasn't working at Atmos, he was always doing something with the fire department. My mom worked in the NICU, so she was a nurse for the babies. And then both my sister-in-law and my sister are both nurses too. So they're doing something in the medical field. And my brother is also working full-time at the city fire department. So we all have that mentality of serving other people. Yeah. Mine just happened to be in the avenue of ministry.
Yeah. Well, that's really neat. So, one of the things that we kind of talked about, and I brought you on the podcast, and you were well, I would say brave enough to kind of open up about some of the your past, what was yesterday, and that was your struggle with pornography.
Yeah.
Which I say it's brave because numbers show that it's a huge problem, not just amongst men but amongst females.
Right.
And you just would love, you thought that maybe we got to talk about that, open up about that a little bit. And so tell us a little bit about your struggle that you had, your 12-year struggle with pornography.
Yeah. So it started, I was, I guess, 6, if I did the math right, which never really good at math, but I want to say I was 6. And it didn't start with, like having a dramatic experience or anything like that. It was just accidentally coming across it. And at first it was just that curiosity. Like as a kid, you're curious to everything.
Yeah.
Like you see something new, you see something different, and you just want to see it. You want to know what it is. And that curiosity just very quickly turned into like staying up super late and flipping through the channels and finding something on TV that I'm like, oh, okay,
yeah,
I can watch this.
Kind of feeding
like,
your curiosity.
Yeah, like everybody's asleep. Like nobody will ever know. I can change the channel real fast. Previous channel button. So there was that, and then eventually it turned into when I had moved bedrooms. So at one point my bedroom was on the other side of the house, and then the living room was in the middle, and my brother's bedroom was on the other side. Well, when he got married, I moved into his room, and that was the room. It had a TV. It had a TV. It had a computer. So I had every way possible to do it. It was never magazines. I kind of skipped that phase, I guess. So it went from TV channels late at night to looking stuff up on the internet. And I had figured it out how to clear the search history and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so it was like a constant thing. Like I couldn't even tell you how many times I actually looked at it during a day or during a week. Some days it was up to like 2 or 3 times a day where I would just get on there and watch. And then sometimes there would be like a whole week where it was every single day. Sometimes there'd be gaps in it. But for the most part, it was at least every night I was looking it up.
And you would qualify that as an addiction.
Oh yeah. Yeah. 'Cause at that point, like it wasn't a curiosity anymore. I'd seen everything. And it just turned into my flesh just like making this fantasy up of like what I thought sex and marriage was, even though like when I stepped away from that, I knew that wasn't anything like what it was actually going to be. But my brain had just my flesh had fueled this fantasy up. Like, this is how things are supposed to be. This is how you treat women. This is the things that you do and everything. So that went on for years and years, and over those years, like that, it had kind of shifted and changed my mind so much that when I was in a relationship, I felt like those things kind of had to happen. I felt like those were the things that fueled a relationship, not necessarily feelings, not love, not quality time, not any of that. Like love languages were out the window, which I didn't know anything about those at the time anyway. So all I'd ever known was, okay, this is what I see here, and this is what I've been fueling myself with, and that's what needs to happen.
Yeah.
It's like if you put the wrong gas in a car, it's not going to run either to its full potential or it's going to break and crumble.
Yeah, so it poisoned your perception of relationships and, perverted the idea of sex and everything like that. So how did that work? So you had, when you were saved and then your struggle with pornography, how did that, where was that conviction of so open up about that and kind of, because you said about 12 years, which, that's just something that the numbers show that people struggle with. And I've opened up about how when I was younger and everything like that. Like,
well, and what's scary more is I read I actually saw an article a couple weeks ago in either USA Today or Washington Post, and they were reporting this study that had been done that they did this survey amongst high school guys, and like the vast majority of them say that that's where they learn about sex.
Yeah,
is from watching pornography. It's not. I mean, it's always awkward talking about it with your parents. I get it, or somebody else, but that's how they're learning about it.
Yeah, which is something that we've kind of talked about in the sense that even in the church, the world is teaching us everything. And then even I think the church fails sometimes to teach students about those aspects of life, and even talking about sex and what that looks like and where that is. Not not where the line is, but the time that needs to be enjoyed.
And another thing, like schools are pushing it so much now too, that like, which I never got it in school till I think it was like 7th grade when we first started going through, I guess, like the sex ed, but it wasn't like an in-depth. It was just like, these are the body parts. Look at these. This is what each one does. But I know a lot of schools now, and even it was like my grade or whatever was kind of in the middle. So a lot of the kids nowadays are getting like an in-depth sex ed talk before they're even in 6th grade. And then like I remember a story about my brother when he was in elementary school, went through like a sex ed thing, and my mom like could not stand it. Like she was so aggravated just at the way all of that played out.
So kind of get back on track, man. It's just sad, but to hear public schools, that public schools teaching children about that, and it's taught us about that, and they don't have that, shouldn't have that right. Parents should be doing that, but that's beside the point. So what you talked about your faith a little bit. Where was that conviction to kind of open up about your struggles? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So like I said, I've been struggling with it ever since I was 6, but I accepted Christ when I was like 8 or 9. So it kind of it held off a little bit when I first accepted Christ. But then it picked up like as I got back into school, as I got back into just like the sometimes random moments of boredom. And I'm a night owl. Like I've told y'all before that I kind of have insomnia, I guess, if that's even a real thing. I love staying up late. I hate waking up early in the morning. So that kind of fueled that too. But how that kind of played in was it was watching it. And then, like I said, that roller coaster of wanting to go into the ministry, I would have these phases of, okay, like, Drew, you shouldn't do that. You need to quit doing that. You need to quit staying up late at night. Just go to bed. So all of that went down. And then when I finally decided to completely surrender to the ministry, it immediately stopped. Like I can't, it's so hard to explain, and it's only God. Like God is the only way I can explain how I was able to stop how I did.
Yeah.
So it was really even before that. It was right when I turned 19. Was probably when I stopped watching it. And it literally went from watching it all the time, which the older I got, kind of the less I watched it, because like I said, there was some relationships and things that were happening that, or even just watching a regular movie, different ways to do it. So I just completely outgrown the looking it up late at night and watching shows late at night that I shouldn't be watching. So it went from that and kind of easing off of it, not in the sense that like I knew I needed to. I just got bored with how I'd been doing it for so long. And eventually that turned into, like I said, the relationships, and then just like it just randomly stopped. Like I quit having an urge. I quit having.
And this is something that you prayed about, and
yeah. So I was in a relationship at the time. And when I was in that relationship, like I just quit watching it already. And this was, I guess the relationship was actually when I was like 18.
Yeah.
And I quit watching it because I was in a relationship. I didn't feel like I really had an urge to watch it anymore. Not that things happened in that relationship to stop it or stop that mindset.
Was there like any shame in kind of being in a relationship with someone that you're pursuing?
Yeah.
Yet there's this, you say like you struggle with any of this. Kind of what was, there's just kind of one thing, there's one side of you, the sin that you were struggling with, and then dating.
Right.
Was there any natural conviction that you had? Just kind of felt like, it's interesting how when people talk about their struggles with pornography, that there's this natural conviction that we can be taught it's right, but in our hearts we know it's wrong.
Yeah, it was a weird thing because I mean, for doing it so long, you almost get numb to it, where you feel like you've done it so much that, oh, one more time isn't going to hurt. One more time watching it isn't going to hurt. One more time, just one more time, one more time, one more time. That's what our mind tells us whenever it has to do with any kind of sin, whether it's pornography, whether it's alcohol, whether it's, cheating in a relationship. No matter what sin you think about, in that moment you do it, yeah, you feel that conviction, but then the next time that urge comes around, our mind and our flesh constantly and immediately tells us, one more time's not going to hurt. Like, you've already done this before.
Yeah,
like, it's okay.
Yeah, that train of thought. Well,
yeah.
I think it's sad that I read this article that said that our generation is having sex less than ever before in history, and one of the reasons is because of pornography. That kids are not, they aren't going to sex. They kind of have their computer, their phone, whatever.
Yeah.
Which is a scary issue that in all aspects struggle with that. And I think Christians, if they're honest with themselves, there's a struggle there. So one of the things I think is really interesting is you talked about how you opened up in the manner in which you told your parents.
Yeah.
And as well as you told your fiance in the same way, which, and kind of talk about that and then the liberation that you felt from doing that.
Yeah. So, like I said, I'd been ministried for a couple years, and I went to Louisiana to do a Disciple Now for a buddy of mine that I grew up with. Actually the same buddy that I'd surrendered to the ministry with. So went to his church, was doing this D Now that was on relationships, and we get to the night where our topic was dropping the things that we carry into relationships and we allow to form our relationships from our past. So basically baggage, and how we should drop our baggage either at the door and leave it there, or we tell our significant other what our baggage is, because you don't ever want to go into a situation and not know the full story. Like if somebody has a problem with something, you want to know that before you get into a serious committed relationship with them. So we get there to the final night, and the final night was this baggage talk. And part of my sermon was actually talking about my porn addiction. And my parents were there. Many adults that went to my home church, or well, not many. My buddy's family was there. His mom, his brother, people that had seen me grow up were in the audience that night. And knowing that was going to be a topic that got brought up and that was going to be a main focus, because, I mean, if there's any sin that's going to have a major weight to teenagers, it's going to be pornography. So that's the one I decided to kind of stick on top of several other addictions and things like that. So knowing that was going to be a topic and knowing that my parents were in the audience, I didn't want to, I guess, shock them by getting through my entire sermon and then dropping this hammer of, hey, Mom and Dad, since you're in the audience, I was addicted to porn for 12 years. So I'd called them in. I'll never forget, we were eating dinner, and I called them in. I said, hey, I need to talk to y'all. And they came in the room, and man, I was so nervous. Like, before I even started talking, I kind of teared up a little bit, because I was like, how are they going to take it? Like, yeah, I'm in ministry now, but are they going to be mad at me? Are they going to show me so much grace? Like, how is their reaction going to be? And I get there, I sit down, I start tearing up, and I'm like, tonight we're talking about, and I just kind of told them what I was going to be talking about that night, and I was like, just so I don't catch y'all off guard, I want y'all to know that I was addicted to porn for 12 years. And both of them, they were kind of like, oh, like their eyes kind of widened just a little bit, and I was like, oh my goodness, what's going to happen now? But the thing was, like, the thing that amazed me, and I could not thank God enough for raising me in a Christian home, was that both my parents showed so much grace in that moment.
Tell them what your mom said.
Mom was like, was it just out of curiosity? Were you really addicted? And I told her, like, this was an addiction. Because curiosity stops at that certain level when you've seen it so much.
Yeah.
And so that happened, and I told them that, that had kind of carried over and shaped relationships and things like that. There was, I can't remember.
Well, didn't your mom say something like, "Yeah, I kind of
Yeah.
I kind of thought that."
Yeah, and my
Like,
mom
I
had
know.
my mom had kind of seen.
Like she'd kind of figured it out.
Yeah, mom knew, which crazy. Moms know everything. So if there's any teenagers watching now or listening in on this, your mom knows what you're doing. So don't try to run from it. Like it's some secret sense that our parents have that they know when their kids are messing up. But yeah, my mom was like, "Yeah, I kind of figured," and I was like, "Wait, what? What do you mean you kind of figured?" And she had said that like there had been some moments where there was some, I guess I didn't clear the history or something like that, and she had saw it on the computer and it had questions, and she never asked me about it, but she asked Dad. So there was immediately like in that moment I was like, oh, like did I open up a can of worms? Like where is this gonna go now? And but all of that ended up being just grace.
Wow.
Grace.
What about with your fiance? You said that on the first date.
Yeah.
Drop
Crazy.
that bomb. Date number 1.
I did. Like, wasn't planning on it. Like, I was expecting to just go in there, get to know each other. Like, she knew that I was in ministry. I knew that she had a heart for ministry. So I was only expecting to come into this conversation with her and just get to know her on that level. Wasn't expecting to like cannonball in and be like, "Hey, I had a 12-year porn addiction. What did you do?" So yeah, date number 1, like we talked for like 5 or 6 hours at a coffee shop, and
Wow.
to the point where like at the very end of the night they were taking chairs up from around us. Like we were sitting outside and they were literally picking the chairs up that were next to us and chaining them up so that nobody would steal them. So they were cleaning up around us, and just that entire talk, like I think our talk started out just about our ministry, and missions, and just kind of like our visions and things that we wanted to do when it came to ministry. And honestly, I couldn't even tell you how it sparked, but I just remember telling her, I was like, "Hey, like I had a 12-year porn addiction, but now I don't, like I promise you I don't struggle with any of that now." And I can honestly say that I haven't looked at porn. Oh my goodness, it's been years and years. I couldn't even tell you the last time I looked at it, which has been nothing but a God thing too, because I know that's one thing that a lot of guys,
that doesn't happen. Like
right,
like all the stories you hear, that you don't just quit cold turkey.
Yeah, there's never that cold turkey quit, and I think that's one thing that makes the addiction or struggle with pornography so much worse, because when it comes to alcohol, when it comes to whatever other kind of sin you think about, those things, a lot of times when you stop those things, you don't ever want to run back to it because you saw what it did to you. But pornography, the addiction of pornography is so much different in the sense that most people, when they stop and they can almost like cut it away as an addiction, they'll have these long phases of not watching it, but then they'll go back and watch it again.
Yeah.
Just to get like a feel, and then they'll have the long break.
It's like a heroin addict or something.
Yeah.
Where it's in.
It's a relapse.
Well, there's so much science to it, and how it poisons not just our brain and our perception of things, of reality, but it also poisons our not poisons, but our body, our way our body responds.
Yeah.
The way our senses and what stimulates our brains and our apparently I've read that it like affects your sex life when you get married and everything, because there's issues with that, because what you find appealing isn't actually a woman, it's the computer, and so there's so many damaging things about that, man. I think that's, and so you felt, man, I bet you felt liberation when you just opened up and you shared the freedom you felt,
like.
Because I think, man, I really think that God honors those when we do something. I think it's biblical that we open up and we confess and we talk. Because I know many times from my wife, before we got married, when we got married and everything, I just said, "Hey, listen, this is something I struggled with growing up." Kind of, for me, the same thing where I was like, "Hey, I was exposed to such a young age, very young age, man," and no one ever told me it was wrong or right. You just kind of you feel that natural shame, which I think is so biblical, but I knew that it was sinful and everything, but I just told my wife and opened up about it. I said, listen, hey, this is something that it can always be a struggle and a possibility. It can always be a vice.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a human being. I'm a man, and I'm a fallen man, and so. And I think even when we pray about things like that, and you said that God will release us sometimes from that. But what's kind of beautiful is your story, and I hopefully the listeners that are listening to this, that sometimes there was Alistair Begg said the other day in chapel it was a good point, but sometimes our handicap and limitations can become our used for our usefulness to God, and so even the struggles we have, because if we're honest about them, that it can somehow encourage people's lives. So, man, I think it's really neat that you opened up about that. So, and I think the big thing that you talking about liberation real quick, man, is God's grace.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So, have you just felt has this kind of opening up and then talking about this, has it changed your perspective on how the greatness of God and His love for us and His grace? I mean,
absolutely. So there was that long phase of like not watching it at all, and then having to I guess bring it back to the surface was hard in itself. Not even the fact that I was bringing it back to the surface with my parents or Shelby, my now fiance, like all of those things. It was like it was almost pushed under the rug and completely forgotten about. Not that it didn't need to be handled, but when those times came up for me to actually share it on a level with someone that has known me for my entire life or known me on such a serious level, dude, it was almost like, and I think I had talked to you about this before, was when that happened, in that moment of letting that sin out there to someone that I knew loved me and it would possibly crush them. When I did that, it was almost like a second salvation almost.
Yeah.
Like when you accept Christ for the first time and you get baptized and go through that process, you feel that weight come off your shoulders. Like you feel like a new person. And even though I'd been through ministry for a couple years at this point, and had been doing honestly really, really well with my walk with God, and this coming back up and then talking to it with my parents, it was that weight coming off my shoulder again that I didn't even realize was there until the topic got brought up.
Yeah, it's amazing how we sometimes like to hoard our issues or sin whenever we need to use it as an opportunity to glorify Christ. Even now you're using your sin and your struggles of the past as a platform to impact others.
Right.
And that old song, my chains are gone, I've been set free.
Yep.
My God, my Savior. That this has a whole new meaning.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Think about that.
Definitely. Them chains are heavy.
Yeah, them chains are heavy. Sin is sin will destroy our lives.
Yeah, and things like that. When it comes to the weight and feeling that weight coming off your shoulder, like I'm not saying pornography is the only one that has that. Like sin in general has that effect on us. Whether that be your alcohol, whether that be just how you treat people, your reactions to things, alcohol, anything that you can imagine, any sort of sin has that same weight on us.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of times, whether that be something like that or something as big as a pornography addiction, whenever you open up about that weight that comes off your shoulder, like that's part of becoming the new self. Becoming the new you is when you let those sins finally just hit the floor and you keep on walking.
Yeah, the Bible says when you abide in Christ, therefore anyone who is in Christ, he's a new creation.
Yep.
The old has passed away and the new has come. That's so much power in that. How you talked about how you ran to the Lord in those times, but man, I think it's a needed conversation that we have. Like last night we had a discussion with everybody about racial conciliation. And the kind of the same thing was like, man, we need to have these conversations more, because it was two buddies that we love and trust, and we just talked about race and our struggles as Christian brothers and trying to talk about it. And one of the issues we talked about is we don't talk about it enough. We don't wrestle with it, and so we stay in this. We like to live in ignorance in some areas and stuff. But even now, man, is that numbers show. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, pornography, and we fail to talk about it more. And what's sad is when you watch movies and TV, it glorifies sex, and it's shown in a way that God did not intend it to be. And even now, it's not just that. It's becoming even more colluded with the LBG community and everything like that. That wasn't God's intent, and sex is used as worship to Him.
Right.
And it's crazy. That's weird to think about. Couples are when you get married, sex is good, and it needs to happen often. But before that is the issue, and Paul talks about that. And even now, where the beauty is that you're getting married at a very, very young age, and I think that's good. I mean, they show historically, man, people actually got married at a very young age because of the same reason. Because we become adults physically at 17, 18 years old, and the average age to get married is I think for women is 28 years old. Yeah. So you're asking two couples to court each other, to pursue each other, they have stress of being young and school and everything like that, and then we're like, all right, I want you to go 10 years without any physical attraction whatsoever. That's not good. You're setting people up for failure.
Right.
And then your relationship with Shelby isn't based upon wanting to have sex. It's more than that. And I think the beauty is that, man, you sat down with the girl that you really liked, and you said, listen, this is my sin, and this is who I am.
Yeah.
Unashamed of that. But look what God's done for me. It's not so much the sin that we talk about to listeners, but it's God's grace.
Right.
That's
and
so
awesome. It was so crazy too. Like when I had told her, I had almost kind of came in with the mindset of like, if anything is going to chase her away, then it's going to be a 12-year porn addiction. So like I came into it, I was like, okay, like I wasn't necessarily expecting to go into it that deep. Like I was expecting that to at least be like date number 3, but it happened date 1. And I left that thinking, well, if we meet up again, like I'm marrying this girl. Like if we go on another date after I just spilled the beans about my 12-year porn addiction, then this is the woman I'm going to marry. And sure enough, like she showed grace on me in that moment, knowing that was a sin that I struggled with and the sin that I've now put behind me, and was willing to go forward with me growing in Christ and going in a relationship that did not, like that wasn't a piece of it. Yeah.
So man, for listeners that are listening right now at this moment, and there's some that are so encouraged, wow, and there's conviction probably there. What would you say to someone that's struggling with pornography? What would you say to them?
First things first, open up about it. Like I know that's one of the hardest things to do, and that is something that a lot of times our pride wants to get in the way of.
Yeah.
And our mind is going to constantly tell you, keep this to yourself. Nobody needs to know about it. And the thing is, you can do that and be semi-content, but you will never be able to get past it until you open up about it.
Yeah.
So open up about it for sure. Number 2, don't be alone. Like if you feel that urge, especially if you've already opened up to somebody about it, you give that person a call immediately. If you hadn't opened up about it, just do not put yourself even in a situation to where you're alone and you let your mind wonder about, okay, like I'm kind of bored. What am I going to do now?
Yeah.
Because that's where a lot of that creeps in. That's where sin itself creeps in, is when we let ourselves be idle and sit in one.
Like don't set yourself up for failure.
Right. Exactly.
Like in the same way, like when me and Maggie were dating, we weren't never alone.
Mm-hmm.
We always kind of stayed around people.
Yeah.
So that we wouldn't set each other up for failure. So that's good advice.
Yeah. So open up about it, and don't, like I said, don't ever let yourself be alone. If you can, like if you have a tight group of bros or a tight group of ladies that you hang out with, open up about that stuff. Because if anybody's going to give you advice on how to get past that, it's going to be other people that have struggled with the same exact struggle.
Just
you're struggling
coming
with.
Together. It's crazy that how much we need God's grace that we can't even trust our own selves. In a room by ourselves with the with the temptation,
Right.
which is, man, that's wild. I think, man, this is so. I think it's brave of you just to open up about this and just talk about it. I think it's your sin is not where your identity lies.
Right.
It's in Christ.
Right.
And the beauty is that what you're saying is that listen, we have a loving God, and that's what the Christian faith is. We have a loving God that will cover us in His goodness and His perfect love, and we can run to the cross, man, and lay down our sins. Because that's what Christ died for. Christ died for your sins on the cross. And He's done that for me. He's done that for Clayton. And, man, that's the beauty of the Christian walk.
Absolutely.
That we are failing every day, and we will never measure up. But we have Jesus who came down and lived a perfect life so that we can live in the presence of Him forever. So, man, it's good stuff, man.
Grace is a crazy, crazy thing.
It's what draws us to God.
Yeah,
it's not shame or anything. You didn't do that. You came to God. You opened up, and God released you from that.
Right.
From that struggle.
Well, I heard it said one time that God does not regret saving you. The idea that eventually you're like, He's going to get fed up with this eventually. If I keep doing this, and He's going to be like, all right, whatever. I'm not going to forgive you anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Like you but it's never. He knew before He went to the cross everything He was going to have to deal with from you, but He still went. So that kind of mindset is something that I try and keep in moments where I screw up, and especially, like I said, we all have those things that we all struggle with over and over and over again. But it's the idea of I knew how many times you were going to mess up, and I know every time you're going to mess up in the future, but I still went.
Yeah.
So why do you think?
Right.
Why are you struggling now?
It's crazy. God doesn't need us, but He wants us. He wants us, and that's a powerful. That the Creator of the universe wants us. Wow. Well, man, we had a great conversation this morning. I'm praying, man, that this episode will really impact somebody's life, encourage them, and man, thank you for your boldness to come on here.
There's nothing but God, man.
Yeah,
He pours out grace. We're able to pour it out on others.
Yeah,
so.
Man, I will say this: that your engagement, your wedding's coming up. I think things are already being planned ahead. Getting married in the beautiful state of Georgia. I just want to, listeners, if you're out there, just pray for Drew and his fiancee Shelby, and I pray for a happy ever ending, and that man, and even you talk about God's grace when you get married, it's a whole different level of experience.
That's it.
Love when it says love your wife as Christ loved the church. Oh man, it changes everything. You get that more and more, and I'm learning that now. Yeah. And I realize how much of a failure I am as a human being. But luckily I have Jesus. So
that's it.
Man, it's a good conversation this morning on a Friday. Well, we're out, man.
All righty. Thank y'all for having me.
All right. Dakota Adair here. You have just listened to the Falling Forward Podcast. Connect with us at fallingforwardpodcast.com to join the conversation. Access show notes or reach out to today's guest. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. It's very much appreciated. The song used in this podcast is called Stunts by Arthur Nelson. Find his music on iTunes and Spotify. And thank you for listening.
Oh,